As We Heal is a space for open conversation, personal stories, and diverse perspectives. The experiences shared in this episode are unique to each individual and may not reflect the experiences of others. Nothing discussed should be taken as professional advice. Please consult an appropriate professional for support relating to your own health, well-being, or circumstance. Welcome to another episode of As We Heal, and I am so excited today because we have the incredible Evelyn Scott here. Now, if you don't know who Evelyn is a women's health advocate. She advocates for women with endometriosis in particular, has been on her own endometriosis journey, and is also an author with a new book releasing in August of 2026, so very soon. I will be diving into all things when it comes to the book, endometriosis, and Evelyn's personal journey, which has now brought her here. So I am so excited to have you here. And before we jump into anything and any questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
So, hi, and lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I know we met on another podcast, which is fantastic. My name is Evelyn Scott. I'm a women's health advocate and sufferer of endometriosis and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I've been advocating for women with conditions like endometriosis probably about 6 years now, but I've suffered since I was a teenager. And I'm really excited to get into the nitty-gritty of it today.
I'm excited that you're here. And I also think that when it comes to all things, I can probably talk for the world, but when it comes to endometriosis, where I know so many women suffer with it on a day-to-day basis, I too wish to be educated about it even more from your own personal experiences. I also am so excited to read your book.
Thank you.
Because it's going to be so eye-opening. And even as someone who's already experienced so much negligence and, so many come back later, come back when you want to get pregnant, all these types of lines that I've heard along my own PCOS diagnosis, it's truly sad that there is a whole other experience going on and very similar experience for women with endometriosis.
Yeah.
Well, today, because we talk about all things healing here, I want to learn a little bit about your healing journey and what that's been like. So tell me a little bit about, where in life are you at the moment? What is life looking like for you on a day-to-day basis?
So, so I'm at a weird stage of my life right now. So I had an emergency hysterectomy last February, and I was hoping that it might be the answer that I was looking for, that I wouldn't be suffering from hideous symptoms anymore. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, and I'm in pain again, which isn't great. So I'm in that stage where I've done everything I can. I've spoken to so many doctors and specialists and things. And I'm back. I feel like I'm back at square one physically, but obviously I've started this women's advocating journey. I've built a community of women up, which has been fantastic. And I'm so grateful for that every day. And I think that makes the horrible symptoms so much more bearable when you've got people around you who believe you, who support you, have been through similar things. We're sort of united in this crazy, horrible journey, but we still manage to give a bit of joy to each other and stuff. I'd say that's where I'm at. Obviously I've written the book. I always wanted to write a book. I didn't want to write a book about endometriosis, I'll be honest, but one of my friends was like, you need to write a book about your experiences. And I was like, no. And then I decided I was just going to go for it. And that's something I've always wanted to do. So I'm really excited about that. But obviously the physical, not so great, but yeah.
Of course. So I love that you said that you never really wanted to write a book about endometriosis, because that makes sense. Like, to sit and to go through what you still go through on a day-to-day basis, even after your hysterectomy, which I'm assuming when you were told to get the hysterectomy, you were told that that would then be the solution. And to now be sitting in a place where you feel like you're at square one again and to talk through and to write about your experiences, I think is truly admirable, because so many people who are going through that day-to-day experience want to feel validated somehow.
Yeah.
When it comes to, endo and your journey, you were a teenager when you first started experiencing symptoms. So
What was that like, going through so many years? Because I know we spoke a little bit before recording that you were actually diagnosed when you were 30.
Yeah.
So going through teenagehood to your 20s without a diagnosis and knowing what's going on, how did that feel?
So it was pretty scary, and I write about this in the book because it's one of my most memorable memories of being a teenager is actually seeing my friend come on her period, and she went into the toilet and she came out and she had blood everywhere, all over her hands, what I now know to be clots. And I remember seeing this and being absolutely horrified, and I was like, that's terrifying. And then we had sex education, and I'd come on my period a little bit before sex education happened, as a lot of girls do, I'm learning. My period was really, really painful. I remember being in agony and throwing up and feeling very weak, and not being able to, hide the fact that I was on my period. I was like leaking everywhere. And, as a teenager, kids can be quite mean. And, I remember leaking in my chair in a science class and being known as the period girl, which absolutely sucked. Yeah, so when we had sex education, I was kind of hoping for a bit of clarification because I didn't understand why other girls weren't in as much pain as I was, and why I was having to take the week of my period off and other girls weren't. And the focus was very much reproduction. This is the stage of of the fetus. This is how children are born. I remember getting shown a really dodgy video that I think everybody was shown of a woman giving birth. Really traumatic.
Right.
And I remember sitting there and waiting for someone to talk about periods, and then it was sort of really glossed over, and it was like, if you have your period, that means you're not pregnant. And there was nothing like, this isn't normal, this is what's normal, this is what you can expect, this is how the resources that can help you. So I remember leaving sex education feeling more confused than when I went in there. And I grew up in a single father home. So my dad got custody of me, and he didn't know how to deal with a teenage girl having her first period. And he didn't know what was normal. And so I felt very alone with it. And I spoke to my nan, and my nan was like, we in this family, we've all had quite painful periods. You just have to kind of just deal with it. And that was the overriding narrative, that periods are supposed to be painful. You just need to suck it up. And that's what I did. And I went to college, and my periods just got progressively worse. I was having to take the week of my period off. I was collapsing sometimes because the pain was so awful, being rushed to hospital where I was told that this was normal, and I was kind of made out to feel like I was being weak, that, if other girls can deal with it, then you should be able to deal with it, which just filled me with shame, actually. And I remember feeling really embarrassed and not wanting to talk to anyone about it. And I went to the family doctor, and he said, you need to go on the pill, which, I did do because, you trust your doctor, and he seemed to know what he was talking about. And I just wanted some relief, and I now know that that's not the right answer, although the medical guidelines still say that should be the first line of treatment. And the pill, it helped to a certain degree, but not a lot. And I just really struggled with that because I just didn't understand why my body hated me. That's what it felt like. It was really, really tough. And then when I went to university, it was getting even worse. Like, I started bleeding during ovulation as well. And I was having to get deadlines, because, like apply for later deadlines, because I couldn't get the work in on time because I just felt so rotten. And it just felt really, really lonely. And again, I was sort of looking around at other females, seeing them going out with friends regularly, achieving all this stuff, and I'm thinking, well, why am I struggling so much? Maybe the problem is me. And it was really, really upsetting quite a few times, and I lost a lot of friendships because I couldn't be relied upon to turn up to friends' houses and go for dinners and go clubbing. And back then I pushed myself so hard because I wanted to be like everybody else, and I didn't really understand that that I was quite ill, basically, that I was suffering from endometriosis, and nobody ever mentioned that word to me. They just sort of gave me lots of painkillers and sent me on my merry way.
And I think it's a lot. In your teens, in your 20s, when you're trying to figure out life, and you're also navigating friendships, relationships. There is so much going on, and yet you are feeling as though you can't take part or participate in the things that you should have been able to. Do you feel like endometriosis had you miss out on a lot of living?
Yeah. Yeah, I think endometriosis has robbed me of a lot of things. So the ability to have children being one, but also the ability to have meaningful relationships, I find. I mean, like everybody in their 20s does in their late teens, I wanted to have a partner and I had partners, but they would get frustrated with me as well. So I remember having to go to the hospital and my boyfriend at the time saying, I'm going out for beers, I can't take you. And then I come out of the A&E department hours later and try and call him to say, you know, could you come pick me up and I'm okay. And he turned his phone off because he just got so fed up with me. And I look back now and I think, what a horrible person to do that to me. But at the time, I took that on because I was like, I am the problem. I'm causing these people to get frustrated with me because I'm not strong enough to deal with it. And when I was studying for my doctorate, so my dream had always been to be this high-flying academic, and I pushed myself really hard, and I had to step away from my PhD because I just wasn't well enough anymore, and I was having to apply for all these extra deadlines and all this extra support that I wasn't getting. And the problem is with academia is it's very much an old boys club. Periods and menstrual health issues are already taboo, but when you take it into that environment, it's not spoken about at all. So when I would try and speak to people about it, it was hard, and I just felt like nobody ever understood it. They thought I was being dramatic. So I ended up having to step away from that. And that was my whole life. Like, academia was all I'd ever wanted to do. My identity was very much, I'm going to work in this field. That's going to be my life. I'm going to be successful. And then all of a sudden that was sort of pulled away from me, like, you know, like a rug from beneath my feet. And I remember sort of like, no, I don't know who I am anymore. Like, am I just a girl who is weak, that can't handle her periods? But at that point, I knew that something wasn't quite right, but I still didn't understand what. I went to a gynecologist. I got referred to a gynae around that time and had an internal ultrasound and had the blood tests, and they said, you know, everything's normal. I now know that endometriosis wouldn't have shown up in those tests anyway, but I was actually categorically told that it couldn't be endometriosis because those tests had returned as normal. So again, I was left feeling really confused and stressed, and I went through quite a horrible period of heavy depression because I just didn't know what to do, and I felt like I couldn't carry on like that, you know.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like much of a life to me at that point.
Yeah, and so many women who are not diagnosed for such a long time are sitting in this phase of limbo of what is happening, and you question and you ask yourself, is it you personally? Is there something wrong with you? Why are you different? And I understand this because I see women and clients and people in the PCOS community who DM me and they're like, I'm experiencing all of these things, but I don't have a diagnosis, so I don't know. And it is really hard to go through that and to sit in that limbo every single day, to turn up to A&E and to just be told, well, you know, here you go. Here's some painkillers, off you go home. I personally have been going through, you know, a non-diagnosis of having seizures since the age of 8. I'll tell you an experience I had recently. So my last seizure I had was in March, so a couple months ago. I went to A&E with just trying to push to find out, why am I experiencing this? Like, this is a lot because, you know, I could have a perfectly fine day. I've spoken to my clients on the phone. I've been taking care of my daughter. I'm now sat on the couch doing some studying or watching some TV. And then that's it. I feel my body go cold and I have a seizure. And during this seizure specifically, I didn't realize, but I got concussed and I had a concussion. So it's now 3 days later that these symptoms of my concussion have shown up. I've gone to A&E because I couldn't focus on anything. A&E sat me down, sent me to a separate room, and they said, oh, the doctors told us to give you this. And I said, well, what is it? And they said, oh, liquid morphine. So they've now given me morphine, and in about 20 minutes, they told me to go home.
Yeah.
They did not look into anything. I then got an MRI referral about a couple months later, a month later. So I got my MRI done, but still I've not heard anything back. So then it's this waiting game, and I've been waiting for, well, over 10 years now, since the age of 8. Why am I having seizures? And I'm not epileptic, so, that still needs to be found out. And you are in this limbo. And I wonder if, I don't know, if the world was different and if men were going through this, how would it be treated? So I do ask myself these. But I wanted to ask you, so your story, honestly, to me, it inspires me so much, which is why I wanted to have you on here. And I want to know, based on everything that you've gone through, do you feel as though your diagnosis experience and also your childhood experience has shaped the woman you are today? And how is that?
So it's a really interesting question, and I'm really sorry you went through that, by the way. That's absolutely horrendous. I have many stories about liquid morphine. That seems to be the answer to everything. But no, I got diagnosed by chance because there just happened to be an endometriosis specialist on call when I was in accident and emergency. Otherwise it would never have happened. And I thought that the diagnosis would be the end of the battle, that I would have the answer, there would be treatment options, there would be a care plan, my suffering was over. And actually, a lot of women feel like that. It sounds funny to say they want the diagnosis, but they do, because it gives some clarification and it validates what they've been going through. And I was certainly one of those people who was slightly relieved when I was told that they'd found endometriosis inside me. Once you're diagnosed, they don't know what to do with you. So you end up being discharged straight away, given some painkillers. Sometimes they'll suggest you have the Mirena coil, which is what I had put in. Didn't agree with me at all. So I ended up on this other battle to try and get treatment. So it never really, the struggle never really ended. And I think my childhood wasn't fantastic. I came from quite an abusive home. So I sought validation from figures like doctors who, they seemed strong to me. They knew what they were talking about. They were stable. They represented security and what was right. And so when your doctors can't be relied upon, it really, really shakes the foundations that, it makes you question everything. Yeah, there's no one. And so my last gynecology appointment was with the doctor who'd performed my hysterectomy. And he said to me that endometriosis is a disease of the pelvic cavity. It cannot go anywhere else. And obviously, modern research now knows that endometriosis is a whole body disease and it can be found anywhere. Like, it's been found in gums, in armpits, in organs, in other organs. And he just didn't even want to entertain it. And I said to him, I said, look, there was another consultant who said that I had endometriosis on my bowels. And he was like, no, you don't have that. And it's really upsetting when you sort of think, okay, I've done a lot of research myself because I've had to do that because no one else is trying to fight for me. And then when you know that you know more than the doctor, it's pretty upsetting, to be honest, because then you're like, well, where do you go from here? And I had to contact patient liaison services to put in a complaint and ask to see another gynecologist. And it's really hard. I think my childhood made me quite strong, but then it also made me quite vulnerable. So I'll have days where, and I think a lot of people see me on social media like I'm always fighting the fight. And actually I have days where I just don't have the energy for it anymore. I just want to stay in bed, like I can barely get out of bed. There are days where I feel so hopeless and lost that I just want to, lay on the sofa and watch ridiculous daytime television. So it is hard. And I think I go through stages of feeling very up and down, but it's definitely changed who I am today. And I hate sort of that endometriosis has taken over my life, but I know a lot of people with chronic conditions who feel the same. It does become your life. It becomes your everyday and you can't get away from it. And that's really, really hard.
Yeah. I think I resonate with that so much because a huge part of my life has become helping women with PCOS. And the reason is because every day I'm trying to help myself with PCOS. And so because I'm talking about it so much, even, I've gotten comments on my page before, like, give it a rest.
Yeah, I get those. Yeah, I get those.
And it's like, but it doesn't give me a rest.
No.
So why?
Yeah,
Why will I stop talking about it? Because
absolutely.
I know that, for example, of course, I have my daughter who's 2 now. I know that her chances of having PCOS in the future are a lot higher.
Yeah.
And probability is that she will have PCOS. But should we have more people talking about chronic health conditions that actually get looked over so often by the NHS and by healthcare systems that aren't, actually prioritizing it? And I know so many systems are strained at the moment, but it doesn't mean that we suffer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that you touched on childhood and how that's shaped you into the woman you are today. Would you say, and I noticed correlations when it comes to a lot of women that I work with PCOS growing up under really stressful environments, and I did too. Would you say that this is something that you noticed too? And would you say that the traumatic events that you went through, and you are totally open to talk about them if you want to, that you went through as a child has also, I would say, even, caused a lot of flare-ups within your body physically?
So I think there is a link between trauma and chronic pain conditions and chronic diseases all across the board. And I think a lot of people worry about talking about it because it falls into the mental health category. And when you have conditions like endometriosis, mental health gets weaponized against you. So you're hysterical, you're being dramatic. We fall into that, it's very easy for doctors to say you're hysterical. And I've been called hysterical so many times. So it's really hard. I mean, I suffer from anxiety and depression as well. There's thousands of times I've gone to the doctor and they've said, do you think maybe it is all in your head? It's your depression showing up. And I think there is probably an element of that. Like when I have stress in my life, I do flare up a lot. My flare ups are horrendous when I have stress in my life, but it's a very physical thing, right? Like, you can't, I've been there where I'm like, maybe it is all in my head, but then I'm bleeding several liters out of my body and I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. That's a real physical thing. But there's a great book by Gabor Matt, which talks about the link between trauma and chronic pain, and it is a very real thing. But I think it can be that can also be used against you. I was abused sexually as a child, and it was awful. And thank you. It was awful. And when I was first talking to doctors about having these problems. And obviously one of the big things with endometriosis that people don't talk about a lot is how painful sex is. So I was having sex with people and being in agony and too scared to say, you're hurting me, because I didn't want to upset the person I was with. But my doctor would say to me, do you think you're in pain because you went through abuse as a child? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. But it does get used against you in that situation. So although there is a definite link between trauma and these sorts of conditions, I think we have to be careful how we speak about it because it gets used against us all the time. And I hate that. One of the big things I get from doctors is you should go and have CBT. And I've had CBT many times. It's brilliant. And it does work. It does wonders for a lot of people. Unfortunately, it didn't really work for me. But I just get sick of people saying, you've been through this trauma. This is why you're feeling like this, because it basically invalidates you. And then it's sort of your whole identity becomes defined by this traumatic event that it shouldn't be. There's so much more to people than that. So it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. So, firstly, I'm so sorry. Like, even just hearing what you've gone through, it's so difficult to comprehend that, right now you spend so much of your time advocating for and sharing your day-to-day journey, which is a real life. And if anyone here, if you take a moment to follow Evelyn on her social media, she shares the raw and real reality of going through endometriosis. And it's hard to sit there to write a book where you are advocating and championing a real push for change when it comes to women's health is incredible. When I was younger, I went through a stage of homelessness. I had to drop out of school and everything, and I lived in a shed. And I was actually speaking to one of my friends' mums about this, and she actually asked me. She was like, "Well, Keisha, how did that affect you? Like, does it affect you now?" And honestly, that aspect of my life, as tough as it was, I don't think it affects me in the way that other people think it did. For me, right now, my day to day, when it gets real tough is when my PCOS symptoms get really hard to navigate. When I don't ovulate 1 month and I feel awful and I know that my cycle is delayed and I feel really sluggish and I'm trying to figure out, right, what is happening. That's when I don't feel great, and I probably feel worse then and what I go through on a day-to-day basis if I'm not taking care of my health and how much I can manage my PCOS than what I experienced as a child. I also agree that there is definitely a link, because when I speak to clients too, a lot of them go through high stress situations, which then push for like chronic stress, but it's almost an addition to rather than the cause of. So I completely hear you. Wanted to ask, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, however, you do spend so much time advocating for women and sharing your raw and real journey online. But what about those days where you also struggle? Like, what is something that people probably don't see online?
So obviously there's that standard warning, isn't there, that everything you see on social media is not the entire life. You get a glimpse and it is very much what that person wants to show you. And I do try on my hard days to go online and to create content, but some days I can't. I've actually just taken a week off because we lost a family member, and yeah, thank you. And that caused me to have quite a bad flare up, and it also made me really, really sad, and I just couldn't face being online. And this was when the women's health strategy update came out, and I thought, I really need to post some content about that, but I just couldn't do it. I just felt unable to, and I was really angry at myself for not doing it. And then I thought, well, actually, my body needs some time, my head needs some time, and that's okay. But there are days where I can't get up out of bed, and there are days where I just need to put my phone away. Yesterday I actually disconnected my emails from my phone because I needed a bit of a break. They're back on now, but yeah, it's when those days where you just can't do anything, I find quite tough. I also think there's an element of competitiveness in social media. So when you say, you're online and you say you're in pain, and there's someone else saying, I'm in pain, I'm in more pain than you are, and blah, blah, blah. And that's quite tough to deal with. I always find that quite tough because I'm like, we're all in this together, guys. Let's support each other and help each other. But yeah, I think days where I'm in bad pain, I sometimes just can't do the content. I can't show up. And it's been a lesson for me, really, because I've had to learn that being angry with my body isn't going to help that. And what I actually need to do is listen to my body. And if it needs the rest, let myself rest. I used to think that rest needed to be earned, and it was something that you had to really push to deserve. And now I'm like, well, actually, have I rested enough to show up in my best and most meaningful way? So yeah, you probably don't see my roughest, bad, restful days, which you should all be grateful for, by the way, because it's not pretty.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. And if, we take a second to actually talk about a bloody scandal, which you're releasing in August, tell me about that. And also, I have one additional question, which I can totally repeat soon as well. Tell me about a bloody scandal. And also, since you have written the book, have you ever gone to one of your appointments and actually said, I am writing a book about this, and, what's your name?
So I'll answer the second one first, because something funny happened to me at my last gynae appointment, actually, the one I was speaking about earlier. I went in the room. Well, actually, I had a nurse come and escort me from the waiting room in, and she was very, very nice to me. And I was suspicious, really suspicious, which is terrible. And then I went in and there was a room of 5 people, so it wasn't just my consultant. And I did feel like maybe they knew what I'd been up to. But when I was in the Daily Mail and when I was in the Times, I noticed that, within hours, I would suddenly get a notification on my NHS app that I had an appointment. So I actually told the nurse at my last MRI appointment that I was writing a book about it. It's not something I advertise when I go into doctors' offices because I don't want to make anyone feel like they're being monitored and analysed. But at the same time, I'm like, come on, I know a lot about this. And they've tried to give me RIQ, which I don't want. And I've done a lot of research into it. A lot of people have horrendous side effects. It's also synthetic hormones, which are terrible for people with endometriosis and PCOS. And I was like, I've done a lot of research about this, so I'm not taking it. And the consultant was like, well, you should take it because I'm a doctor. And I'm like, well, I've just written a book about this, so no. So that was interesting. And I think it does get people's backs up. But then I'm also glad that I'm going into those appointments armed with all this knowledge and research and also lived experience. But I think lived experience is very dismissed in appointments. People don't want to hear it. They want to hear about the science. But in reality, the science for these conditions is imperfect. They don't have the answers. The research is very limited. So lived experience is crucial. But yeah, I wrote Bloody Scandal and I've loved writing it. It's part memoir, part analysis of the medical systems and the way we are treated throughout our journey. So it starts with your first period and what sort of intervention could happen during that first period to make someone like me not feel so frightened and alone with it. So like more comprehensive sex education, more resources at schools. And then what happens when you start suffering the symptoms and, talking about how doctors should be more open to investigation and not dismiss people because they don't know what's going on. So I'm a very firm believer that, it should be a collaboration between a doctor and a patient rather than a doctor just saying, this is what you need to do. We need to have open conversations and explain how these conditions are affecting our lives, because what living well looks different for every person, right? My priority was not to be in so much pain, but someone else's might be totally different. And it's all about approaching the patient as a human being rather than just a statistic and realizing there's a lot more. And then the book goes on to look at the diagnostic methods and how we need more, non-invasive methods. And I analyse various medical systems across the world where they're all encountering the same problems, but they're very different systems. So trying to get to the root of what is actually, why are women suffering on such a large scale? And it was quite an interesting process writing it because I didn't want to be in it at first. I was dead against being in it because I wanted it to be about other women, but then I ended up weaving sort of a memoir throughout, which was it was like therapy for me because I was writing about memories that I didn't realise had upset me so much at the time. And then looking back at them, I was like, wow, that was really hard. And there were days I had to step away from the computer and just go and just sit in the garden because I was really upset. And I was like, that didn't upset me very, very much at the time, but it was actually horrible what I went through. So it was sort of like facing all those experiences and looking at them through a new lens of what I know now. So it was very cathartic, but also very empowering. Like the stuff I found speaking to so many incredible women who have been through the mill and just uniting all those voices and bringing them together in a way that I hope will make the institutions that can change things stand up and listen. Because I think there's a lot of lip service, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. There's online hospitals and stuff like that. But we never really see any meaningful change. We hear a lot of promises, but yeah, nothing actually seems to change at all. And so I'm hoping that I can infuriate enough institutions to do something about it.
Well, I'm so excited to see that all come to play because I honestly feel as though, we're in the year of the fire horse. I don't know if you...
Yes, we are.
And I'm so excited to see how you are able to create this change because I truly know that you will and you are. And I'm so excited to read the book myself. So August the 13th.
Yeah, you can pre-order at Waterstones,
Yep.
on Amazon and any good bookshop.
Amazing. I'm so excited for you. And I wanted to ask you just a couple closing questions that I like to ask everyone. If younger you could see who you are now and where you are now, what do you think she would say?
I think she'd probably cry. When you ask me that question, it makes me want to cry, because I know when I was a child, I didn't have a lot of support. And I used to write books in my bedroom when I was like 8. I used to make them out of paper and crayons and stuff. And I think doing that, writing a book, was always what I wanted to do. And also being strong, I like to think that I've become the sort of person that would have protected a younger me, the sort of person that I needed growing up. Yeah, it's quite emotional, isn't it, talking about that?
I love that. And you totally would have been, and you are, because the younger you still lives inside of you. And I think, hearing that you used to write books as a little girl, and, now you have written a whole book,
I know.
that is going to infuriate, institutions and make change. And, then older you, will look back and be like, yeah, like, good on you.
Yeah,
So
I hope
I'm really proud of you, and I'm really excited for you, and I'm excited for the endo community and for everything that your book is gonna create. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. And if you're watching this, then make sure to pre-order Evelyn's book.
Thank you.
And give her a follow. She is on Instagram, and where else can we find you? TikTok as well. And yeah, just keep following her and keep advocating for yourself, because it makes a huge difference.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And as always, if you ever have any questions, my inbox is open all the time. So please reach out. Ask me anything. It's all good. I just want to be there for people. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.